Welcome to this episode of Fear Less, Do More. Today I'm talking with Simon Rushworth, who is a journalist. Now, journalism might not be something you would automatically associate with being fearless, but Simon really is, both from a professional and a personal point of view. He's just launched a new venture, and he's also met some incredible people on his journey through journalism over the years, so I can't wait to talk to him about that. Morning, Simon, and thank you for joining me today. It's great to see you. You've had quite a unusual career in lots of ways, and you've had lots of interesting things have happened to you and because of you along the way. So I thought we could explore some of that today. But let's go back to where it all started in your first proper job, which was at the Chronicle.
It was, my first proper job was as a cub reporter at the Chronicle. I went into the Chronicle in the Easter of my final year when I was at Sheffield University to do some work experience. By that point, I was applying for a lot of jobs, and they said to me after that, if you haven't got a job in the summer, feel free to come back and just come in whenever you like and do a few bits and bobs. I didn't have a job in the summer, so I came back and did that. And then the basketball franchise moved from Sunderland to what was then the brand new Newcastle Arena. And because it had been a Sunderland sport traditionally, nobody on the Chronicle wanted to go anywhere near it. But the sports editor, Paul, was a big basketball fan. And so he wanted somebody to do it. No, everyone else just refused point blank. But I said, yeah, I'll do it, because it was a chance to do it. And they actually paid me a little bit of money every week. So I got a page in the Pink, and I got to write 2 or 3 stories a week. And I did that from the September. And then in the interim period, I got taken on to the training course starting in January as the Chronicle's trainee. So, people always say, you have to have a bit of luck and it's all about being in the right place at the right time. But that really was the case for me, because I think my application form was near the bottom of a pile of 800 applications at the time. Oh, and because the editor had seen me around and seen my face, he actually went up to HR and sort of dug it out and gave me an interview. So I started as a cub reporter on the Chronicle. I'd only just finished the course when I then got seconded for a football season to cover Newcastle United, which was the 96-97 season, which was my dream job, really. I got to go down to the training ground at Maiden Castle in Durham every day, speak to Peter Beardsley and Tino Asprilla and David Ginola, and it was fantastic. The downside for me was that Kevin Keegan, the manager at the time, wasn't a big fan of the United magazine. He felt there was already too much pressure being put on the players media-wise, and he didn't feel there was any room for something else. And so even though all the players loved it and it was very well received by them, there was in the background there was this constant sort of, I could feel that he didn't like it. And it all came to a head around Christmas, but I managed to cling on, and he left a couple of weeks later. So that was the season. So
were you the reason why Kevin Keegan left Newcastle United?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people joke that it was it was either him going or me. But he even wrote about it in his autobiography that he didn't like the fact that these 2 young lads were at the training ground every day talking to the players, and so it was a shame, because he'd been one of my boyhood heroes, and I really wanted him to get involved and wanted him to like it, but and obviously, as it turned out, he clearly had a lot of other things going on, because he left the club in the January, and then Kenny Dalglish came in. Then I had to go back to being a news journalist for another 18 months to get my qualifications, to sit my senior journalism exams. So I went back into news. My patch was North Tyneside, so I was based in the North Shields office for 6 to 9 months, I think. But I also realised when you work on a local or regional newspaper, there aren't enough staff to cover everything. Yeah. And at the time, nobody was actually interested in heavy metal or rock, which I know you'll find.
Why would that be?
I honestly couldn't believe it.
Especially at that time.
So my desk was just a few desks along from Gordon Barr, who was the Chronicle's entertainment reporter at the time. And I overheard Gordon having a conversation with a PR person about a trip to Paris to go and see Iron Maiden. This was in 1999. And Gordon was, Gordon just wasn't interested in that kind of thing. I could sense him, he was getting to the point where he was going to say, well, thanks, it's a lovely offer, but no. So I went and stood over his shoulder. I'm going, so he said, oh, so he passed me the phone, and I had a chat. Anyway, it turned out it was an all expenses paid trip to Paris for the weekend to go and see Iron Maiden, first class on the Eurostar. I got to sit next to Tommy Vance from the Radio 1 Rock Show, met the band afterwards. It was absolutely fantastic. And so from that point onwards, I said to Gordon, anything to do with rock and metal that you're not keen on, just give me a shout. So kind of by default, I started writing about music at that point. And then when I moved to the Journal a few years later, I carried on. I ended up writing a rock music column for the Journal. I then ended up writing for Classic Rock magazine. And as you know, I've got Rushonrock as well, which started in 2008.
So what's that for those who don't know about it?
I can't believe there are people who still don't know what it is. So Rushonrock is a website devoted to, I suppose, all kinds of guitar music, really, from country all the way through to death metal. I set it up actually because there was some of the stuff I was being offered for the Journal at the time. It was just a little bit too niche for the Journal. So I remember, for instance, being offered an interview with Corey from Slipknot.
Yeah.
And even though I was desperate to do it, I knew that there's no way the Journal were going to put a piece in about Slipknot. So I thought, well, how can I do this? Because I don't want to turn it down. So Adam, who was my business partner at Paperclip It for many years, said, well, why don't you just set up a website? He designs websites and builds them. So he built me Rushonrock, and it's still there now.
Very good. Avid follower, obviously.
Oh, thanks.
How important as a journalist do you think it is to be passionate about what you write about?
Incredibly, and that's what I have always said to the students that I've taught over the years. I think what you've got to realise is, a huge part of your working week is writing thousands and thousands and thousands of words, and if you're not passionate about the subject, that can become really, really difficult. So fortunately, I've been able to write about sport and music almost throughout my career, but in the last few years, I've written a lot of business stories, and actually, what I've realised is it's not so much the subjects I'm passionate about; it's the writing and sort of writing some quality content. That's what I'm passionate about. I find interest in everything, really. I think probably when I started out writing about business or politics, I would have said, that's not really for me. It's a little bit dry. But when I do those stories, I make them about the people. And once you do that, it becomes, fascinating. So I think I've always been passionate about sport and music as subjects or things that I would follow even if I wasn't a journalist. But I think I'm probably more passionate about the writing, and I still love writing now.
And obviously you've mentioned a few names there of bands and of sporting people that you've come across. There must have been over the years some real pinch me moments when you're going, I cannot believe I am sitting here with X.
Yeah, I mean, loads. I mean, I suppose Kevin Keegan was one. He, like I say, he was a huge boyhood hero for me. The first time I met Slash, I went to see Guns N' Roses at Gateshead Stadium. In 1992, I think it would be. Did you go to that one? Yeah. So that was a fantastic day. And back then I was, I think at 92, I must just have done my A levels, I think, and it was a boiling hot day. And it was back then I used to queue at the venues early in the morning, so I could then peg it down to the front and just stay there all day. I think Soundgarden and Faith No More were the supports that day, so it was a fantastic day. And you see Slash on stage then, and I suppose back then I was still hoping I could be Slash on stage one day. I was still trying to learn the guitar, and but certainly you just never imagine you'll get to meet somebody like that. Quite a few years later, I got invited down to London to interview him. The first thing I thought when I saw him was how tiny he is. And if you look back to the promo pictures that they did back in the day, he's always stood near the front. So he's obviously got his big top hat on. So he looks like a normal sized bloke, but actually when he had his hair all pulled down, his cap on, he was tiny. And that was the first thing. And I realized as well that from here upwards, he's muscle bound and ripped, and then he's got these skinny little legs. So obviously, he carries his guitar around all the time. He's pretty strong up there, but he's got tiny little legs. And he was great. What I have found is that people in the music business, even the very sort of the biggest names, they do tend to be really decent people. I think there's that phrase which I used in my first column for the QT the other week about don't meet your heroes. And I suppose that kind of applies to Kevin Keegan in that instance. But generally in the music business, I would say do meet your heroes, because they all tend to be pretty decent. I mean, there's very few people I can think of who haven't been a great interview, or even if I've just met them at a festival, haven't been fantastic to talk to me. I remember Alice Cooper. First time I met him, I was probably more excited about that than Slash, really, just because, you know, Alice is a real legend of metal and has been around for so long. Again, I saw him at Whitley Bay Ice Rink, probably in the late 80s, around the time Poison, the song, was out. And I got to sit on his tour bus outside the City Hall, and we talked about golf. He's a huge golf fan. He sang some song with the name Simon in that I'd never heard before, and I've never heard it since. But as soon as I said my name, he said, "Oh yeah, there's that song about Simon," and he just started singing it, and that was really, really surreal.
And I mean, over the years, you must have seen big changes in media. I mean, obviously, as a consumer of media, you see the changes as well. Everything moving online, regional media changing, and in a lot of cases disappearing. What sort of impact does that have on you as a journalist, seeing those changes? Are you excited about the future, or?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I think the first thing is to say it gets back to the original point of me being passionate about writing, and I still am passionate about doing that myself. But I'm also an advocate for quality content, long reads, strong opinion, and a lot of these things have gradually disappeared from mainstream regional journalism, which has been it has been quite sad to see. There are still, you know, some exceptional regional and local journalists out there, and I think it must be quite difficult for them to sort of carry the fight. Because if you've been involved in the industry for, say, 20 or 30 years, the change has been so rapid. Within that, there's been the move towards digital, and most of the major regional media organisations have attempted all kinds of different approaches to try and get the best out of their print offering and the digital media. And I don't think anybody's really found the answer yet. On the face of it, for me, what's happened in the last decade is that the quality of print journalism has declined, and that's to do with all kinds of issues. There's not as much advertising revenue coming in. Consequently, there's not the budget's nowhere near it was for the staff. A lot of the higher earning, more experienced staff have taken redundancy, and there's a lot of pressure on the new journalists coming in. Interestingly, though, I mean, a question I get asked a lot, or a conversation I have a lot, is, it must be really difficult for journalists today, coming into the industry doing their job, because they don't have the same access, they don't have the same connection, they don't have the amount of time to work on stories. But of course, it's like any job, it's just what you know. So if you actually talk to the new journalists coming into the profession, they're fine about it, because that's what they've been taught to do, that's what they know, and they're very good at that. The journalist of today, the multimedia journalist of today, can source something from social media, turn it into a 300-word story with video and pictures, and turn that around incredibly quickly. I couldn't do that. I'm not suited to the digital media age as it is now, but I think there's an argument for finding a happy medium. I think that there were definitely 3 or 4 different audiences out there now. I suppose the audience I relate to are the over 35s or the over 40s, but a lot of the student journalists I train are aiming at their peer group, or the under 35s, the under 40s, and are very, very good at sourcing the right content for them. What I wouldn't like to see is quality journalism disappear altogether, and I don't think it will. I think there are a lot of newspapers are struggling, I think, nationally and regionally, in terms of how they approach the next 5 years. And I think the new boss of Reach came out a few weeks ago and said that people have to get used to the fact that some newspapers won't be here in a few years' time. But then, I go into WH Smith's and look at the number of magazines that are there, and the quality journalism that's in there, and so that there is a space for it. And I mean, as you know, I'm a big vinyl fan, And 15 years ago, people would have laughed if I'd said, vinyl will be doing really, really well
Tapes
in 2024. Now. Yeah, even cassettes. And I've seen it with vinyl, seen it with books. I'm kind of hoping that to some extent I'll see it with newspapers, that in a few years' time people will realise actually we do miss a quality newspaper. It may be online. It may be too expensive to print newspapers by then. But even if it's online, I think as long as there's some quality journalism, some good long reads there, then I'll be happy with that.
Just popping in to say, if you are enjoying the conversation so far and want to make sure you keep up to date with other episodes, then please hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. Let's jump back into the conversation now. So in the face of all that change and disruption to the industry, you've decided to take quite a brave step, which is to become associate editor at a new publication. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so the QT is the brainchild of my former journal editor, Brian Aitken. I used to love working for Brian and with Brian on the journal, and we've kept in touch ever since. Brian's maintained a high profile within the business community in the Northeast and retained a lot of his key contacts. And I think it was just coming out of the first lockdown was probably the first time we talked about this, or the first time he reached out and said, I've got an idea about launching a new regional publication. I think in his mind he always envisioned it being online, which was fine. So we had a chat. Prior to that, he'd already had a chat with Sam Rushworth, who was the journal's features editor, with David Whetstone. They put together the Culture magazine back in the day, and then set up Cultured Northeast as a website. And Sam's been heavily involved from day one. And as I say, Brian then brought me into the conversation, and then Dave Whetstone. And I think we all agreed that if there was the opportunity, we'd love to try and put out something new that where the focus was on quality journalism and wasn't necessarily on trying to make money from advertising and using clickbait and having pop-up ads. None of us particularly enjoy that reading experience. So we decided quite early on if we were ever going to do this, our two USPs were going to be quality content and no clickbait or pop-up ads. For that to work, we quickly realised we needed to have a strong subscriber offering, because if we're not bringing any money in through advertising, we can't just do it for free. So we decided it was going to have to be a subscriber base, and of course we also needed to bring in the initial investment to get us off the ground, and it's taken a long time. And I think at several points during that journey, Brian was probably quite close to walking away. I mean, he was essentially doing a full-time job just trying to establish and set up the QT. The hours that he put in, it was just insane. At the same time, Sam and I were doing our normal jobs and trying to help where we could. And, Sam did a lot more behind the scenes than I was able to do at the time. And I think towards the end of last year, towards the end of 2023, it kind of came to, or maybe in the middle of the year, it kind of came to a crunch time where we'd spent so much time trying to put this together and bring in the investment that we either had to do it, even though we probably didn't feel we had enough investment. But I think we always felt we wanted a bit more. But we got to a point where actually we have got enough. We've got enough to put out something that we can be proud of and that will be a quality read. And once it hits the market, hopefully there'll be more interest in terms of future investment. Because it's all very well saying to people, this is what it's going to be like. I mean, we did a mock-up edition. We had various people from the region come and have a look and give us feedback. And even the mocked-up edition looked great and there was a lot of interest. But there's only so many people who are prepared to invest when there's nothing there. So, I kind of agreed with Brian. I said, look, I think we should launch, because once it's out there, we can say to people, this is what it is. Now, see whether you want to get involved. So we are 3 editions in now. And the feedback's been fantastic so far. It's obviously still very, very challenging. We'd love to have more subscribers, as anybody would with a subscription-based model. But the subscribers we already have are delighted with what they're getting. We are bringing in new people each week. The support we've had from the region has been fantastic, but I'm very conscious that we operate in a kind of media, PR, corporate bubble, and all of those people are very supportive and really want us to do well, because it helps everybody. It helps the wider region to have some quality journalism out there. But the people we need to reach are everybody else. People who have maybe forgotten how much they do enjoy reading a longer form story and do enjoy reading honestly held opinion, quality comment, the views of experts, people who know what they're talking about. And we've actually introduced from day one, we wanted to have a section called Civilised Society, because I think the other thing we all got frustrated with over the years was the way that social media is so divisive, and people feel like when they go on social media, they have to have one view or another. You can't really have a reasoned debate.
Yeah.
So our Civilised Society section is full of people with very, very strong opinions and big ideas, not all of which, me and you would agree with, but it's a forum for those debates and discussions to take place, which again, there hasn't really been that for a long, long time. So, we want to offer people the chance to have their say, and rather than somebody just firing out a comment at the bottom of the story saying, well, this is rubbish, I don't agree with that. There's then the opportunity for people who have a different view to come on board and carry on the conversation, but in a very civilised fashion.
Absolutely, and I think that you're right. There's been massive polarisation around all sorts of different subjects. But I don't know whether you listen to The Rest is Politics, which is Rory Stewart and Oscar, and they talk about disagreeing agreeably. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, about learning to listen to other people's opinions and think about how your opinion might change in that context.
And I'm still one of the few people who watch Question Time religiously. And again, Question Time used to be a place for that.
It did.
But somewhere along the line, unfortunately, even Question Time's become very, very divisive, and it's almost as if people are turning up, whether they're on the panel or in the audience, they're turning up to
ready for a fight,
have a go, which is never what Question Time used to be. It used to be a place where people could have a really sort of reasoned debate, and you came away as a viewer with a lot of interesting thoughts going through your head.
So what's the vision for? Well, first of all, before the vision, where did you get the name from?
Well, I can't remember. Originally, Brian came up with a name that me and Sam just weren't happy with at all, and we explained that to him in the nicest possible way. It was a very clever idea, but it didn't really resonate with me and Sam, and so consequently we thought it wouldn't necessarily resonate with anyone else. So I think the QT was the one he came back with next. It doesn't really have a meaning, although I suppose we always saw it as sort of being on the QT. So because we're a subscription model, we want people to subscribe because they think that they're missing out on the quality content and the discussion and the debate that's going on, so kind of on the QT. Now, when I mentioned this to the Newcastle University students I spoke to earlier this week, most of them had never heard of the phrase on the QT. And I had to explain it to them. And once they understood, they thought, oh, that's quite a nice idea. That's the basis of it. And I think it works very well. It has a nice ring to it. And I think the fact that it's not obvious also works for us as well, really, because even if people are seeing the logo or looking at the name, talking about the name, saying it, I think that's good for us, that it's a conversation in itself.
And what's the vision for the future? Where would you like to take it?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now the vision for the future is we need to get to a certain number of subscribers and members to make it sustainable, and we believe we can do that. We have a target for the first year and a target for the second year. It's a modest, realistic target. It gets back to the point I made before. I mean, I don't think anybody goes into media these days to make any money. Our aim is to be sustainable and to give all of those people I talked about before a platform to have their say, and for us to be in a position where we can spend a bit of time creating content that maybe other regional local media platforms can't. We want to become established as a kind of trusted voice for the North East, and we want people to know that we don't have any particular political leaning. We're unbiased. Having said that, we'll give everybody from every political party a chance to be involved and to have their say. It's a big year for the North East with the mayoral elections, and then of course the general election later in the year. So I think it's a good year for us to launch in that respect, because a lot of what's going on there is what we want to be talking about, and there will be a strong platform for people to to talk about what's going on there throughout the year. I just hope, we've got a lot of positives in place. We've got an experienced team. We've got a business plan that's been developed for a long, long time now. We know who our target markets are. We know what people want and what people don't want. The big unknown is how many people these days are prepared to pay for their news. I think a lot of people have been conditioned to get their news for free, and it's a real challenge for us. We have to, on a weekly basis, show people that it's worth them paying $7.99 a month or $79.99 annually to read the QT. And there'll be a lot of people who look at that and say, well, I can go somewhere else and read this for nothing. So it's very, very important that we maintain our quality standards, because that's the only way we're going to get people to read the product.
So outside of journalism, obviously you're big interest on music and sport. What other stuff do you enjoy?
Well, this is the thing, you see. I just happen to do a job that, around the subjects that I enjoy, which then probably makes me sound a little bit boring because I'm racking my brains thinking, what else do I actually do? Because when I'm not doing my job, I'm watching sport or I'm watching music or listening to music.
And your family are musical as well?
Well, they are. So that's the interesting thing. I love music and I've always loved music. And I mentioned before, I probably aspired to be Slash one day, but I've never, ever been able to learn the electric guitar. I've had some lovely guitars over the years and never been able to do it. And Alex, my wife, who is talented in many other respects, isn't musical either. But Katie and Martha, my daughters, are incredibly musical, both of them. And so, I suppose one of the things I do spend a lot of time doing is going around and watching them play and taking them to rehearsals. And I love all of that. I've always loved being around the music business and having them involved in it now to an extent, I love as well. So, we do spend a lot of time as a family, going to concerts, either gigs that we all want to go to or gigs that Katie or Martha might be involved with. And it was lovely last year that Katie was able to put on her first headline gig last year down in North Shields, and Martha was her drummer that night, so they were able to play in the band together. And then they had another couple of gigs as a band together. Katie's since moved to London to study music down there. So they aren't playing as much together now, but that was lovely to see them playing together. Martha's only 16, but a very, very talented drummer. She can sing and play the guitar, and I just have no idea how they do it. Katie will write a song, and an hour later she'll be singing it without reading what she's just written. It'll just all be in her head, and I just can't understand how anybody does that.
No,
but,
me neither.
But it's lovely to see, and I suppose my ultimate dream one day is that I'll just be able to be Katie's PR person and Martha's PR person and follow them around the world.
And she's got her first festival this year.
She has, yes. So she's been booked to do Camp Festival in Shropshire and Dorset this year. Fantastic family festival. There's the Darkness and Paloma Faith and Rick Astley and loads of others on there. So it's a fantastic festival. But I think what Katie was most excited about was she's on the poster next to Mr. Tumble. He was one of the heroes of her youth, and she actually said to me, if as a 5-year-old you would have said to me that in 13 years' time I would have been on a poster next to Mr. Tumble, I would have been happy then. That would have been it.
Career highlight.
Yeah.
So the podcast's called Fear Less, Do More. We've obviously talked about some periods where you've taken the plunge. You're doing something new now. When's been in your career, either personal or career actually, where you felt most challenged?
Yeah, well, obviously the QT is a fantastic example of Fear Less, Do More, because we could just have said last year, let's not bother. It's just not worth the risk. So that professionally we've already covered that, and I think I'll probably look back on that in years to come, and that will be the ultimate example of sort of taking the plunge. Yeah, I haven't taken the plunge to the extent that Brian has, but I've supported him in doing that, and that's been fantastic. So I'm glad we've done that. I think personally, it's probably so on Katie's first birthday, I was diagnosed with skin cancer. So that would be 17, 18 years ago now. I think even before then, because Katie had been born and the nature of the job I had at the time, I was doing a lot of travelling all over the world, covering football. And I did want to be more of a kind of present dad anyway. So I was already thinking about a change. And I think maybe I had already made a slight career change to go from being a sort of day-to-day sports reporter to being a little bit more office-based. I think at that point I was the assistant sports editor, so I was a little bit more office-based. But I think that day made me realise that I was right to go down that road, because you know what it's like. Suddenly you're kind of faced with that C word, and you think, well, I've got to try and do everything I possibly can in the next few months or years or whatever, and make sure I make the right decisions, because the kind of pressure's on. Looking back now, I've been so lucky to have sort of come through that, and I'm still here, and I've had no more scares since then. But it was a really interesting time. And in terms of sort of fearing less and doing more, for me, it was a very, very interesting period, because I had a biopsy, and then very soon after they said, yes, it's skin cancer, you're going to have an operation. I was lying on the operating table for about an hour and a half while they cut an area of skin out from the back of my leg. I was conscious the whole time. And I was chatting away to the surgeon. And at the time, this would be sort of April, May time, and at the time, Cancer Research UK were just about to launch their annual SunSmart campaign, and they were looking for men in their 20s and 30s. And I think what they were really looking for was like some big sort of builders with tattoos who, spent every summer out with their tops off, and never put any sun cream on. But I think the surgeon was probably thinking, actually, he's kind of the next best thing, not ideal, but, having talked to him, he'll probably say something. So as the kind of hour and a half went on, and as he was cutting out the bit of skin out of my leg, he was gradually kind of moving towards asking me if I would do it. But the thing was, it was all happening within a couple of weeks, and he'd already said that it would be at least a week before I could sort of get out of bed and get stood up again and be on my leg. But I said, yeah, in principle, I'll do it. So I'd been back at home for a day or two, and Cancer Research UK got in touch and said, we've had a few chats, we understand you might be all right to help. And I didn't really know what it would entail. But anyway, they said, could you come down to London? And I said, yeah, as long as I'm okay. So it was only about a week after, or 10 days after my operation, that I got on a train and went down to London. And then I ended up doing some breakfast telly. I did Channel 5's lunchtime news. I did Radio 5. And I found myself on the other side, well, a bit like this really, on the other side, being interviewed about it. And I, from a professional perspective, I found it fascinating. But I also realised that they did find it difficult to find people who were prepared to do that. And I mean, this was probably only 4 or 5 weeks since I'd actually gone in to the dermatology unit at the RVI and had no idea. And within 5 weeks, I'd been diagnosed, had my operation, and there I was talking about it. And I think that was probably a good thing, because I think if I'd had more time to think about it, I would have said, I just want to sort of get on with this in my own time, really. But that was, all of that was made me think, I have got to not really do what I want to do, but, try and ensure that my life goes in the right direction here, professionally and personally. And since then, I really have, done a lot more. I've tried to do as much as I can. And I mean, even last year when I was originally looking at doing a feature on something called the Faber Academy. So it's the publisher's Faber. They decided they were going to open their first academy outside of London, and they were based at the Common Room in Newcastle. And so I was originally going to do a feature on this, but then I saw that they were advertising for an advanced novel writing course. And because I had a bit of time on my hands, I thought, well, actually, I'd be quite interested in that. So I talked to the chap organising it, and I said I wanted to do a feature. And he said, well, actually, why don't you apply? So I said, oh, okay. So I submitted my synopsis only about 2 days before the deadline. The people running the course had no idea I'd had this chat about doing a story. And I got taken on along with 4 other people. And so from March until September last year, I was at the Common Room every Tuesday night for 2 hours, working with Preeti Taneja, who's a published author based at Newcastle University, learning how to write a novel. And by the end of it, I had an 85,000 word novel.
Wow. And has it been published?
Well, no. When I went into it, I had no idea just how long-winded the whole publication process was. I genuinely started that course in March with a chapter, or maybe 2, thinking, by the end of this, I'll have written my book, which I did, which was good. I'll have written my book and it'll be out by Christmas, and then I can write my next one. But I had no idea what you have to go through to get to the next stage. So the stage I'm at now is trying to find an agent, because without an agent, you can't reach a publisher. So I need an agent who's interested in football and rock music. You won't be surprised to know that my novel
fiction?
Yes, it's fiction, but it is fiction, but it's based on football and rock music. Everybody says write
Gotta be
about
a
what you
bestseller.
know. Well, I would have thought so. I mean, you like it, so I'll maybe just sell it to you. I have said to some people, I wish I'd done this before because I've always wanted to do it, but I'd never have had the time to do it before. It's just that I didn't have a lot of work on last year, and so it was the right time. Now, of course, I'm full on with the QT, and I don't really have the time to go the next step. But it's there. I've done it, and
So we might have to wait a while for a sequel.
Yeah, I think so. It's all in there. I've got the sequel and the one after that. But it's as Preeti, my tutor, kept telling me throughout the course, don't think about your sequel until your first one's out.
Yeah. One last question. If you've obviously met loads of people who have been like heroes of yours through the ages, one person that you've not met who absolutely, if you had the opportunity, alive or dead, if you had the opportunity to meet them tomorrow, who would that be?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. It's one of those ones you should have prepped me for. And there are so many people, really. It would probably be, football-wise, I think it would be Jackie Milburn. I'd love to have chatted to him. I was born in Ashington, same as him. And I love reading about, the stories of how different football was back then and how, you get a bus into town and just sit with all the fans. And it's so far removed from what it's like now. And if he was a footballer now, he'd be a multi-millionaire, whereas he really only earned a kind of working class wage despite the talent he had. Music-wise, probably Bon Scott from AC/DC, because I'm obviously very much of the Brian Johnson era AC/DC, and again the stuff I read about Bon Scott, he was such a character and a real contrast to Brian Johnson in many ways. Obviously he had a sort of tragically short life, really, but I would love to sit those two around the table and have a few beers.
Excellent. Well, that's a good place to end. So thanks very much for joining me today. Really enjoyed the chat.
Lovely. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed that episode of our podcast, Fear Less, Do More. If you did, then please follow or subscribe. If you enjoyed what we talked about in this episode, then you might enjoy this one here, which is also linked in the show notes. Thanks for listening.